We got heads rolling behind the bench, big time injuries to major fantasy stars, and everything in between covered on the latest edition of your daily source for fantasy hockey news, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Jim Montgomery out the door, J.T Miller stepping away, and of course, big time bets. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You heard the music, and you know what time it is. It's time for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. With Steele and Flip, shout out, salute, much love, and thank you so much to the everydayers holding us down and making us your first listen every single day, Monday through Friday. You can find us across every single platform that you find your favorite content. Thank you so much for tuning in for Wednesday's episode. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Just in case, today's episode is actually brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season big with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can get a $5 bet to hit $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Steele, it's actually FanDuel. If you want to work your magic on that one, you can feel free. But let's really reel in and work our magic on today's episode. Jim Montgomery out the door. I want to talk about it with you.
Wow.
Boston Bruins. You and I have not discussed the Boston Bruins a ton, and there are some fantasy pieces here that I think we need to look at. So he go. J.T. Miller, near and dear to your heart. I know this. The listeners know this. This is very intriguing because you and I haven't spoken a ton about him or the Canucks. So we'll get there. Ovi, Matthews, we spoke about them both on yesterday's episode. We got to get an update in once again and round it out with Wednesday's big-time betting board. I believe we got 5 games, Mr. Rodin. Over to you. I feel like we always get you guys in and out in 30 minutes. Today it's going to be tight. What are you seeing from this Boston Bruins team? Because finally, we predicted the downfall, and for now, this team is not looking nearly good enough.
Yeah, predicted the downfall, but not the downfall of Jim Montgomery behind the bench of the Boston Bruins. This is an absolute shocker to me. I mean, it shouldn't be a shocker when you look at the guys at the helm in the front office. You know, Cam Neely and those guys back there. You know, the president of hockey operations for this organization. They've done an abysmal job so far, and it's really tough to see the turning out rate of coaches in the National Hockey League, how quickly they're in and out. When you look at the record from Jim Montgomery, I mean, it's an absolute shocker. He's been with the team for over 2 years now. He has a .715 point percentage and a .656 win percentage. I mean, he has an all-time record with the Boston Bruins of 120, 41, and 23. He's been a fantastic coach. And then you look at what they got rid of before Jim Montgomery. They fired Bruce Cassidy. He went on to win a Stanley Cup with the Vegas Golden Knights. So I'm not quite sure what the decision was to get rid of Jim Montgomery, who's been a fantastic NHL coach for this Bruins organization. It's a real mind boggler to me. It's so hard to see coaches get fired when the team's just not succeeding so far. And this is a team that set the all-time record pretty much 2 seasons ago. They've been in the playoffs. Struggled obviously in the first 2 rounds, but this, to me, it falls on the players. I mean, David Pasternak's been their best player still, and I don't even think he's been at his best. They get no depth scoring right now, and I mean, this is how it always turns out. There's always someone that is the scapegoat, the one to blame, and it's always the head coach. And I don't think Jim Montgomery will be without a job for very long. Somebody's going to want to target him real quickly.
I have a number of things I'd like to bring up with this Boston Bruins club, Mr. Rodin, and none of them are actually going to be the Maple Leafs vitriol that I usually like to spit. Because as much as you and I have been incorrect about what we've seen from the Boston Bruins, and yes, there is a lot of time to be and NHL games to be played here, but let me just throw out a few angles your way and we can circle back. Of course, J.T. Miller, Matthews, Betts, all of that. Take this in. The last 2 Bruins head coaches, Bruce Cassidy, Jim Montgomery. Bruce Cassidy gets canned. At the time, 245 wins, 108 losses, and 46 OT losses. That was a .672 win percentage and he was the best at that during that time. Jim Montgomery, 120 wins, 41 losses in 23. That was also the best record during that time span, and he gone as well. There's something that's not right in the water here in Boston, and I'm also looking, and this is point number 2, I'm looking, and this has a big time impact on fantasy owners. I'm looking at the guy in the blue paint, and Jeremy Swayman. There were a lot of fantasy circles throwing this guy out there right after Shesterkin and Hellebuck, that he was being the third guy off the board. And I know in a few leagues that you and I are in, he was a very high draft pick. I don't have his ADP up. All I know is this: 5.7-2, 3.47 goals against, and an 8.84 save percentage is by far the worst we've ever seen from Swayman. The forward group, we'll get there. I've got some beef up there as well. But the third angle here is, and I think you alluded to it, you mentioned Cam Neely in the front office, it's Don Sweeney. It's general manager here. Making some really interesting / in our opinion, not the greatest of moves. So there's a few different angles that can crop up here with this Boston Bruins team. There is a lot of time left in the season, so I don't want to look too crazy by saying their season is cooked. But if Swayman keeps putting up those numbers, not only are fantasy GMs in a whole lot of trouble, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that if we have time, but this team will continue to be in trouble regardless of what happens up front. He has to be better.
Yeah, I think the thing with this team we also have to keep in mind, they have a lot of people, a lot of young talent on their team right now. You can kind of go through the lineup, and I didn't even realize how much this team lost in the offseason when you look at the grand scheme of things with this organization right now. And I have some of the moves from this offseason. I mean, obviously we all know traded away Linus Allmark. That was move number 1. They couldn't sign Jeremy Swayman, and he's been pretty bad since they got that contract done. But they let Jake DeBrusk, Grzelcyk, Heinen, JVR, Maroon. Now, obviously, these aren't top-tier names, maybe besides Jake DeBrusk, but he's
character guys, though.
Character guys, depth guys who maybe don't produce offensively all the time, but they fill those areas and do well elsewhere on the ice. They paid $84.25 million to Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, and then end up firing their head coach. So, again, you kind of go looking down through the lineup. I mean, Morgan Geekie, Justin Brazeau, Trent Frederick, Jeffrey Veal, John Beecher, all these guys, you haven't really heard. They're young guys that have been in development of this Boston Bruins organization. So they're a pretty bad offensive group, obviously, outside of Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak, and we're still not seeing their best. So, again, someone has to always be the scapegoat here. Unfortunately, it's most likely the head coach every single time. In this instance, a lot of the blame's got to go to Don Sweeney and Cam Neely for the people they brought in, let go. And I mean, I don't want to go back to a decade ago, but the draft picks, their selections from years on end now, just not panning out for them.
Bad prospect pool. It's an interesting point for sure. Look, Brad Marchand, 13 points in 20 games, fantasy-wise, it's not terrible, but like you expected a little bit more. 17 points in 20 games for Pastrnak. Again, not terrible, but given
Charlie
the
McAvoy has been disgustingly brutal.
Charlie McAvoy is nowhere. And when, Justin Brazeau and Kastelik are up there as some of your top goal scorers, the top 6 or 7 on the team, I think that's enough said. But I will leave it at this because you and I think, actually do a really good job of usually pinning firings on the team. And I know that's not exactly just like a foolproof plan, but for the most part, I think coaches get the raw end of the deal. And let's just throw some love to Monty's way for fun, even though it doesn't really matter. First year as the Boston coach, he led the team to the best single season record in league history, 65-12-5. And then he wins the Jack Adams Award the same season. Steele, that was just over a year ago. And this guy is out the door. I think it's a big mistake from the Bruins, and I think it might actually be their undoing. Because if this guy was even being somewhat impactful in keeping this team together, they just cooked their own goose, because I don't think there's any magic wand of them pulling it out and making a move at the deadline this year, which sometimes they have done. This team is in trouble, so be very wary with what you're doing with these fantasy pieces on this team. I think that can be the main takeaway. Let's get to J.T. Miller after the break, a quick Ovi Matthews update, and, of course, big-time bets for Wednesday night. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Right now, if you get the Prize Picks app, download it today, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by the OGs, our friends at Game Time. You never want a stressful ticket buying experience when you're headed to your next event. Comedy, theater, music, and of course, sports, wherever you're at. Game Time filters out the fluff so you get incredible deals on great seats every single time. Steele and I loving using the Game Time app for all of our Toronto sports needs. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. We're going to show some support for Vancouver Canucks forward J.T. Miller and all of those fantasy GMs out there who own this player moving forward. I mean, obviously it's sad news for a lot of people out there, me included. In the span of a day, Flip, I lost Alexander Ovechkin, J.T. Miller, and Darnell Nurse, or a span of 2 days. So my one fantasy team is a little bit banged up right now, and obviously with J.T. Miller being out indefinitely for the time being, it's not looking good. But obviously his teammates, the coaching staff, the front office are all supporting him. Obviously, there's no injury involved in this. It's just he's out indefinitely for personal reasons, and we'll see him when he's back. But unfortunately, he's going to have to hit the IR. You're going to have to stash him away for the time being.
Yeah, and given that this is an indefinite leave of absence from the team, and indefinite can mean a whole lot of things, but it's not just he has a sick relative. Sometimes you hear that maybe a wife is pregnant, something like that happens, and all of these guys are people. I think another one of the things that you and I do a good job of is try to recognize that sometimes we move these guys around like they're pieces of meat or pawns on a board, and they are human beings, fathers, brothers, and everything else. So first and foremost, and I know you got my back on this, all the best to JT Miller and his family and his friends. I hope everything is okay. This is huge, Steele. This is huge news, not only for fantasy GMs. This is a team in the Vancouver Canucks, and I just had to double-check this because it's somewhat surprising. This team has scored just as many goals as the Montreal Canadiens this season. They are sitting 20th or 18th in the league in goals for, meaning you can ill afford to lose a guy in JT Miller who, 6 goals doesn't jump off the page, but his 16 points in 17 games, he is so critical to their attack. He's so critical to the success of this team. I don't know what you think about this, but they've already overcome a few very serious hurdles. I know Brock Besser's also hurt, but especially in the cage. I already told you I don't know if I'm fully buying into this Vancouver team, and now I am very, very concerned about what this means for a team that's been just kind of hovering around there in that third spot in the Pacific Division.
Yeah, this is a tough situation for the Vancouver Canucks, and they're going to have to rely heavily on Quinn Hughes, their captain, and Elias Pettersson to really step up in the absence of JT Miller. And, he's moving up to that top line center position. He'll be with Kiefer Sherwood and Jake DeBrusk. Dakota Joshua just got back in the lineup as he came back from testicular cancer as well. So there's some room for these guys to really step up in a big way in the top 6, but without Brock Besser, without JT Miller, that 1-2 combo, they're still missing their starting goaltender and Thatcher Demko. Can Kevin Lankinen and Artur Shilovs be the guys? I not with this team right now. They are really banged up. And
Yeah.
again, a lot of the pressure is going on to Elias Pettersson offensively. He has to drive this offense now.
How
And
we feeling about that
this
angle?
season, he hasn't been able to drive the offense whatsoever. So
Yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous for all owners out there who have continued to hold on to him, who have continued to maybe reject trades because they want Elias Pettersson to get back into shape and form of what we've seen him do in the past. This is a tough ask right now because, again, I mean, he's been better of recently, obviously, from the first 2 weeks of the season, but it just hasn't been good enough. And this is a tall task for their young superstar.
Also, when you take a look at that Pacific Division, Steel, it's tight all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Even the San Jose Sharks are only a few points back of the Vancouver Canucks. Do I expect that to happen all season? No. But right now, it means they can ill afford to take the foot off the gas pedal, and there's just not a whole lot of gas in that tank. So, again, much like the Boston Bruins and fantasy pieces, when you see some of these things starting to happen to the team overall, you immediately have to pay attention and know that there is going to be probably some rough road ahead, meaning buyer beware, plug
Yeah.
and play, hit the waiver wire carefully. By the way, Monday waiver wire specials every single week. You can find it right here. The rest of today's episode will get the bets. I think I'll just leave it with you at this. I hope he comes back sooner than later, Steele, because I think a prolonged absence and immediately throwing that strain on PD, who hasn't had it, I'm really, really concerned for this Canucks team. So let's leave it at that quickly. Matthews, he's over in Germany. There's a lot of cloak and dagger situation here. Hit me with your take on it. There's not too much more to be said, I don't think.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk about Ovi, but continues to be a frustrating situation for Leafs fans, but perhaps most importantly for fantasy GMs because he's is apparently getting there, but still is going to miss a couple more games, it looks like.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on this quickly because again, we talked about it yesterday along with Alexander Ovechkin, but I talked yesterday or on the other on our most frequent or recent episode that I didn't like all the privacy, not being able to know what was going on, and I know they're still being private about this situation, but I think this speaks volumes to what is actually going on with Austin Matthews. It's clearly very, very serious, and it was maybe a little bit downplayed for the first couple of weeks, or at least the first week since the injury. But you don't go all the way to Germany. I know he has a connection with this person that he's reaching out to. He's been there in the past, but you're not going all the way to Germany unless it's very, very serious. And I know he struggled with wrist injuries in the past. I don't want to allude to something that's not actually true, but to me it speaks volumes because this has to be a very serious injury. He's going on missing his 7th game in a row.
Let's get to Ovi, but what's funny that you made a mention about a quote from Berube on yesterday's show that it's just kind of maddening. Let me just add to the madness slightly from Treliving today, the Leafs general manager. The trip was more of a general checkup. Next sentence in the quote, but also to get some work done on this thing. Sorry, if you're getting some work done on this thing, that's not a general checkup. And I am not a doctor, but I think I know enough that a general checkup, you don't have work done on something. So let's slide past that and into Ovi very quickly. If you want to, actually, let's get to break. Let's talk about Ovi quickly after the break, and we'll wrap up with bets real quick. It's just really kind of gutless considering how nasty he's looked. This is not good for fantasy. It's not good for the Caps, and it's just not good for hockey.
No, and it's not good for his fantasy hockey value, which we were just talking about yesterday. Or on yesterday's episode. But we'll get to him, obviously the recent injury, and of course, big time bets coming up next. But first, where you can place those bets, it's FanDuel. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you so much once again for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And oh goodness, Flip,
Yeah.
I need some support right now because
Yeah.
like I said, it's been
Damn.
a rough couple of days for my fantasy team. Darnell first,
Mm.
Ovechkin, obviously, J.T. Miller. My casual
Mm-hmm.
league is
Mm-hmm.
looking a little bit swamped right now. Ovechkin out week to week with
Yeah.
a lower body injury, a leg injury, and it didn't look anything bad when it happened, but you could tell from his body language and the way he was on the ice, it was very serious, and it just looked like something got tweaked or locked up. And yeah, he's out for the next week to week.
Man, this just
It's
straight up
brutal timing.
sucks.
Yeah.
Just sucks, man. And it's like, I mentioned that it would be nice to see and this is me as like a straight, just I love hockey,
Yeah.
and I saying another team other than the Leafs to go on a heater in the playoffs. That's blasphemy in most circles. I went on the record yesterday and saying I want to see this Caps team win. I want to see Ovi out there. I want to see the man in the playoffs getting it done. Holy steal, 15 goals. He's the first player aged 39 or older in league history to be the first of 15 goals in a season ever in NHL history. And this just is one of those things that just throws a wrench. And this was, for the NHL as well, if we want to get even bigger picture for a second, which you and I don't do a ton because we like to keep it focused on fantasy, this is actually bad for the game of hockey because they had a really good opportunity here with Ovi. Everybody knows Gretzky. Even outside of hockey circles, even in the States, people know Wayne, great one, 99 hockey, that's him. So this was an opportunity for the NHL, for the sport, for all of it to really put itself on the map in terms of like pop culture once again. And this really does suck. Fantasy, all of it. He was looking so good. He looked good the other night too before he got hurt. And they won't be rushing him back in any sense of the imagination, especially because where they are in the standings. So if they can even tread water, this is going to be a situation as a fantasy GM. You're going to have to put him on the IR. If you're in really, really, shallow leagues and he's out long term, you might have to consider moving on from him, but that's only in select leagues. And right now, I'm going to have to kind of collect my thoughts, and we'll talk about this on Waiver Wire Monday, most definitely.
Yeah, we'll highlight some of the best players to pick up in the absences of all those forwards we just talked about. But it's brutal timing. He was just heating up so hot right now for the Washington
looking
Capitals. 5 goals in his last 2 games. And again, just a freak accident. Again, just a little bit of a small collision with Jack McBain of Utah Hockey Club. And unfortunately, he's out week to week. You got to stash him if you have an available IR spot. We're going to get to big time bets now. Wrap up this episode with some winning picks Wednesday night. 5 games on the board, I believe. Flip, over to you, my friend. Where are you looking first?
Once again, I think I said this to you on yesterday's show. I'm feeling another tough board here. So when I looked at it personally myself, tell me what you think about that. But I got 3 picks. And if you're okay, I'm just going to ream them off really quick because I will say this. I'm going to put this into a parlay. I don't love any pick aside from my lock, and I'll spit it out quick. Vegas at Toronto is where I'm looking first.
Yeah.
2 really big victories here for the Leafs. And I know a couple of the moments in those games, they were sloppy. But coming back against Washington, doing the same against Edmonton, and really kind of rallying the boys here.
Yeah.
Toronto is 6-3-1 in their last 10 against Vegas. First pick hit me with the Leafs on the money line here at home. Vegas, a couple of blips on the radar lately, losing to good teams and beating bad ones. So I'm going to put Toronto in the category as a good one, and they dropped this one in very quickly. I'll hit you with my second and third pick if you're good with that, because I'm keeping this one short and sweet.
Yeah, keep going.
Buffalo at LA Kings, over 6.5. I spoke about the Buffalo Sabres the other night. This is a team that's running and gunning right now offensively. They're struggling in the goal. LA, they can put up goals in a hurry. I'm going to keep it simple. Over 6.5 and lock of the night. This is the one I'm liking the most. The Carolina Hurricanes have owned the Philadelphia Flyers. Over the last 10, I think it's 8-1-1 for the Carolina Hurricanes. Not a ton of value on the money line, but I think what you're going to see here is a bit of a defensive battle. And I think I'm fine with taking the under in this one. Under 6.5 between Carolina and Philly. that's my favorite pick of the game of the night. I'm really seeing a 3-2, maybe 4-2 with an empty net type situation. I would lean to Carolina as well. But my lock of the night, it's going to be the under in the Carolina Philly tilt.
Yeah, I agree with you that this is a back-to-back couple of nights of just very tough boards on where to go to. And when it's really tough out there, me personally, I like to stick and focus on one game in particular. That's what I did or tried to do yesterday with the Tampa Bay Lightning matchup. Obviously, I had the player prop of Connor Bedard as well, but I'm focusing where you started here. I'm looking at that Vegas Golden Knights Toronto Maple Leafs matchup. First pick of the night. Leafs on the money line for every reason you said. The record shows it. They're playing some really good hockey without Austin Matthews, and they're getting some big performances. So that's where I'm going with my second pick. Mitch Marner, 2+ points in this matchup. I'm liking that player prop. He's got 4 multi-point games in the last 5, and he has 8 points total in his last 5 games. So I'm liking the Marner 2+ points. He's been clutch in the third period, down the stretch in hockey games. Really some good performances from him. My last pick of the night, I'm teasing this one down, but I'm taking the over 5.5 in this matchup. 6 out of the last 10 have gone over 6.5. So I like the teasing of getting this down to over 5.5 right now at over 6.5. I believe you're getting plus 124, but I'm feeling comfortable taking it down a notch to the over 5.5.
It's a spicy little same game parlay, if I heard that correctly. And
same game parlay, baby.
I think that's going to have to catch maybe a 10 piece. Your boy's been trying to dial it back on these tough nights. I'm liking those, though. I'm liking those. And I think this could be another one of those moments for the Leafs that, Vegas has had their ups and downs, but I think if they can string together 3 good wins there, and I think that would be, 6 out of 7 without Matthews?
6 out of 7, yeah.
Something like that. That's just really good kind of building moments for the lads. And, we need Matthews back as a Toronto fan base, most definitely, but you like what they're doing without him. So, hey, it's a long season still. We got a lot more to cover. We'll be here Monday through Friday, all the way to that cup is lifted.
Every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. So make sure you're tuning in. Thank you so much for making it your first listen every single day. For your second listen, though, you got to go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.